A daughter hidden from cameras finally reveals what years of separation really meant, the answer nobody saw coming. Born into a world she didn't choose, a small life emerged already recognized by millions. MC1, he stood as cinema's greatest warrior, a performer who battled gravity itself and constructed a legend through pure determination and unshakable faith. Together, their image once blazed so brightly that observers believed nothing could dim it. Tom Cruise, Hollywood's relentless champion, and Suri, the girl he treasured as his greatest gift. Cut to B-roll, red carpet archive. Yet beneath polished appearances, cracks formed silently, growing wider with each passing year. What started as wonder transformed into quiet separation, lengthening shadows and pain beyond any lens's reach. For over 10 years, the world witnessed a father and daughter moving through entirely separate universes, one soaring into stardom's highest reaches, the other constructing a peaceful existence far from the chaos that shaped her beginning. MC2, now at 19, she communicates not through interviews but through decisions, through distance, through a new identity that reveals the burden she's carried in silence, a weight more profound than observers imagined, a reality that shatters the facade and lays bare the hidden sorrow beneath. This isn't merely a celebrity's journey. It's the chronicle of a young woman who matured watching her father from afar, the distance measured not in geography but in years without contact. Quote, it's the story of a parent who once cradled his child like she embodied pure light, only to see that brightness vanish from his path. SFX, melancholic piano. It's the gentle heartbreak of a connection unbroken by genetics, yet severed by years of wordless division. And the roots reach back further than anyone suspected, long before the world recognized a tempest was brewing. While audiences celebrated what appeared as Hollywood's ideal family portrait, an entirely different narrative unfolded beyond public view. MC3, what strangers perceived as simple privacy became, to those truly watching Katie, something far more restrictive, an unseen structure woven from discipline, conviction, and constant surveillance. During Suri's earliest months, the fantasy still sparkled. Tom embodied devotion itself, the committed parent whose energy could transform any space. Katie seemed luminous, holding her newborn with the warmth of someone stepping into a role she'd yearned for. Zoom in. But gradually, that radiance faded, replaced by subtle anxiety visible only to careful observers. Everywhere Katie traveled, a presence followed. Sometimes it manifested as helpers with expressions impossible to interpret. Other occasions brought members of Tom's trusted circle, figures who seemed to glide beside her wordlessly, observing, guiding, documenting. MC4, at restaurants, shopping centers, even casual walks, watchful eyes remained nearby, gentle yet perpetually present, as though her movements no longer belonged solely to her, but to the framework surrounding the man she'd married. One night during what should have been an ordinary meal, a journalist detected something unsettling beneath Katie's courteous expression. When admirers approached their table, Katie responded kindly, then offered a statement that froze the writer instantly. "We don't go outside very much." Cut to B-roll. Paparazzi flashes, the sentence hung in the air like a confession wrapped in velvet, polite yet disturbingly revealing. It suggested boundaries invisible to outsiders, a life where liberty was measured cautiously, and movements tracked like navigation coordinates. Katie's internal landscape began shifting. The vitality that once made her shine on screen started dimming, buried beneath layers of wariness and rehearsed comfort. When discussing Tom, she repeated identical phrases so often they became hollow. "He's amazing. He's wonderful." Words feeling less like praise and more like protection, fragile shields spoken from necessity rather than genuine emotion. MC5, Close friends noticed her laughter no longer came easily. Her gaze carried heaviness, contradicting her smile. Meanwhile, Tom's world continued revolving around him with mathematical precision. He wasn't simply a Scientology believer. He represented one of its most luminous symbols, a champion defending it passionately. Cut to B-roll. Celebrity Center footage. At the Celebrity Center, he was celebrated as evidence of the faith's transformative power, someone embodying mastery, discipline, and total conviction. Within that cosmos, every action held significance, every step served purpose. But for Katie, those same structures giving Tom strength felt like barriers tightening around her existence. Tom's older children, Bella and Connor, both raised deeply within the church, lived with complete alignment and certainty. To Tom, it seemed natural his youngest would eventually walk that same path. But for Katie, whose Catholic upbringing taught different forms of faith and independence, the prospect of raising Suri under rigid doctrine filled her with silent dread. MC6. She struggled concealing the tension between these competing visions, one of structured belief, the other of gentle normalcy, which grew into an unspoken war neither publicly acknowledged. Katie found herself drifting, seeking spaces making her feel authentic again. She withdrew into connections from earlier years, reached toward old friendships, and cherished moments away from Lowe's Angel's orbit. Quote, New York became her sanctuary, a metropolis where anonymity was achievable and breathing came without constant vigilance. But this drifting wasn't passive. Behind every choice lay calculation. Katie had begun sensing that without action, her daughter's destiny would slip beyond her guidance. Every legal document she studied, every discreet conversation with trusted counsel, every solitary moment contemplating Suri's future became components of a slow, methodical strategy. MC7, a strategy demanding perfection, requiring secrecy deeper than the systems surrounding her, a plan that couldn't afford failure. By 2010, fractures in their public facade grew too obvious to ignore. Supporters noticed stiffness between them during appearances. Photographs captured expressions missing genuine warmth. Katie's posture transformed, more protective, more vigilant, as if bearing a burden invisible to others. Even how she held her daughter seemed altered, defensive, watchful, as though understanding the stakes had fundamentally shifted. Katie's quiet resistance wasn't theatrical, but it carried force. She attended fewer church gatherings, gently pushed back against expectations, made choices appearing minor on the surface but disrupting the control's rhythm around her. SFX, ticking clock, and throughout everything, she kept Suri close, her hand wrapped around tiny fingers she refused letting slip into a future she couldn't accept. The moment of liberation hadn't yet arrived, but the foundation was already forming beneath her feet. She was no longer drifting. She was preparing, calculating, observing, waiting for that singular instant when she could break free with her daughter intact. MC8. And when that instant arrived, it would send shockwaves through Hollywood's core. Hollywood had witnessed scandals, separations, betrayals, and conflicts more dramatic than any blockbuster narrative. But nothing prepared the world for June 29, 2012. The day Katie Holmes demolished the perfect family illusion and executed one of entertainment's most calculated secretive escapes. Zoom in to outside observers. Tom Cruise remained cinema's unstoppable presence, the figure whose charisma could illuminate rooms and whose films commanded billions worldwide. Inside her home, Katie was quietly analyzing every move, every regulation, every vulnerability in the system encircling them. She'd mastered disguising her intentions behind gentle expressions and polite acknowledgments. She'd become fluent in silence's language, and she understood that one misstep could collapse everything, especially her daughter's future. MC9. The timing of her departure was as ruthless as it was essential. Days before Tom's 50th birthday, While he filmed Oblivion thousands of miles away in Iceland, Katie struck. She filed for separation in New York, a jurisdiction with custody statutes far more favorable to mothers fearing for their child's emotional or spiritual welfare. And she filed in absolute secrecy, executed so flawlessly that Tom learned of the split exactly how millions of strangers did, through breaking news headlines. Behind that single explosive event lay strategy crafted with surgical accuracy. Cut to B-roll. New York cityscape. Months earlier, Katie had begun severing connections with anyone she suspected of reporting to Scientology representatives. She replaced her phone, changed personal staff, and carefully constructed a privacy wall around herself. Her father, Martin Holmes, an accomplished attorney renowned for strategic excellence, quietly counseled her behind closed doors. Years prior, he'd helped draft the prenuptial contract that would ultimately become her escape route. Now he became her exit plans architect, ensuring every legal maneuver she made was protected, airtight, and timed to absolute perfection. Those understanding Scientology's internal mechanisms knew precisely what Katie feared. MC-10, the possibility that as Suri matured, she might be guided toward programs consuming young members' lives, programs built on discipline, obedience, and lifelong dedication. To Katie, the image of her bright, tender daughter being drawn into that trajectory was unthinkable, so she seized control before the future was written for her. The documents filed told a narrative the public had never heard. The word anchoring her motivations, protection, carried gravity that echoed across headlines. SFX, paper rustling, protection from influence, protection from doctrine, protection from a future she couldn't steer if she remained. And for the first time, the world grasped that fractures in this marriage hadn't stemmed from ordinary incompatibility. They resulted from two colliding universes, one constructed on faith and structure, the other built on maternal instinct to shield her child. What made the divorce even more startling was its velocity. Hollywood separations often dragged months, sometimes years, spilling secrets and bitterness into media. But this concluded in merely 11 days. MC-11, 11 days to dismantle one of modern celebrity memory's most public marriages. 11 days to separate a globally famous actor from the daughter he once called miraculous. 11 days for Katie to secure what she genuinely wanted all along: complete control over Suri's upbringing, education, medical decisions, and spiritual direction. Tom agreed to terms swiftly, almost quietly. He committed to annual child support payments around $400,000, plus additional expenses for health and schooling. But money had never been the objective. Freedom was. Zoom in, and the day after settlement was signed, the image that emerged felt like a carefully orchestrated escape's final act. Katie and Suri appeared in New York City, walking hand in hand, blending into pedestrian flow as if they were any ordinary mother and daughter. No bodyguards, no entourage, no shadows. Gone was the tense figure watched by quiet observers. In her place stood a woman who finally appeared unburdened, her smile no longer stretched thin but soft and authentic. MC-12. For Suri, New York became the landscape of a new childhood, one free from weight she never chose. For Katie, the city's anonymity was salvation. The red carpets, rigid routines, the structure she'd lived under for years, they all vanished overnight like smoke blown from her hands. Tom, meanwhile, continued his work with the same intensity defining his career. As headlines swirled and speculation ran rampant, he buried himself in the world he understood: action sequences, global tour, and the relentless drive to achieve the impossible. Cut to B-roll, Mission Impossible footage, and in that whirlwind of movement and applause, one quiet absence followed him everywhere: the space where his youngest child once stood. The Great Escape of 2012 wasn't just a tabloid event. It was a turning point rewriting everyone's destiny. It was the day a mother reclaimed her voice, the day a child was pulled from a world she might never have chosen, the day a superstar lost something he couldn't retrieve through fame, power, or belief. MC13. And it was only the beginning of a distance that would expand further with every passing year. Silence can hold more weight than anger. It can stretch wider than oceans, deeper than wounds, colder than distance measured in miles. For Tom Cruise and his youngest daughter, silence became the language of the next decade, a vast unspoken realm where love, loss, and regret drifted without direction. SFX, ambient silence. When the divorce settled and New York became the sanctuary for Katie and her child, the world watched for the inevitable reunion, a photograph, a visit, a moment of reconnection between father and daughter. But that moment never materialized. In 2013, a rare deposition cracked open the truth the public had suspected but never confirmed. Lawyers pressed Tom with questions cutting through fame's shimmering facade. Was Scientology part of why Katie walked away? Was it a factor in her custody fight? MC14, at first he bristled, calling the suggestion offensive. But then, in a single sentence, he conceded it was accurate, as one of the assertions. In that quiet admission, the world glimpsed the invisible barrier that had risen between him and his child. According to reports, Tom saw Suri only once after the divorce, a single visit, private and fleeting. No cameras captured it, no witnesses spoke of it. It was a brief moment swallowed by the silence that followed. After that meeting, the public never saw them together again. Not at airports, not at birthdays, not at holidays. Not once in more than a decade. Meanwhile, the father the world adored continued ascending into fame's higher orbit. His career grew into a spectacle of defiance against limits. Cut to B-roll. Stunt sequences, Mission Impossible films pushed him toward impossible stunts, clinging to planes mid-takeoff, scaling skyscrapers, leaping from cliffs. Fans cheered with awe, celebrating his fearlessness, unaware of the quiet void trailing behind him. MC15. As he soared across continents on promotional tour, his daughter was growing up in a different universe, one grounded, steady, and notably absent of him. Katie built a life for Suri far from the frenzy. In Manhattan, the little girl who once filled tabloids lived the life of a normal student. She walked to school with a backpack instead of bodyguards. She took dance classes, visited parks, went for ice cream like any other child. The cameras that once swarmed her faded into the background. New York, with its noise and anonymity, had swallowed the spectacle. Friends of the family described Suri as warm, bright, and grounded, a child who had somehow emerged from chaos with grace and gentleness. MC16, but there were traces of the past she carried with her. Whenever conversations drifted toward her father, she would simply change the subject, not with hostility but with quiet finality, as if protecting something fragile inside herself. She didn't speak of anger, didn't speak of longing, didn't speak of loss. She simply stepped away from the topic, the same way she had stepped away from the world he lived in. As years passed, the contrast between their lives became striking. Tom appeared on red carpets, surrounded by castmates and flashing lights, embodying the tireless showmanship that defined him. His public persona grew larger, louder, more exhilarating. Zoom in, he was flying fighter jets, training for zero-gravity scenes and preparing for the first Hollywood film shot in outer space. He was everywhere and unstoppable, and yet in all that noise, there was a silence that fame couldn't drown out. Time marched forward. Suri entered her teenage years with the steady rhythm of a life her mother had fiercely protected. MC17. She attended a private Manhattan school, made art, performed music, built friendships. Each milestone came and went without her father's presence. Birthdays, performances, graduations. Photos showed her smiling with friends, walking beside her mother, carrying textbooks, laughing on sidewalks. She looked peaceful. But there was something unmistakably guarded in the way she carried herself, a softness paired with invisible armor. Insiders claimed that Tom continued paying for her education and medical care, honoring the settlement's terms. But financial support was not the wound. The wound was the absence, persistent, widening, and impossible to ignore. SFX, heartbeat. As more years drifted by, the world began asking questions no one dared say out loud at first. Was the distance too wide to mend? Had belief, loyalty, and obligation built a fortress too strong for fatherhood to penetrate? Or had time simply reshaped their lives so completely that returning to one another felt like stepping into a past neither could reclaim? The tragedy was not in scandal or conflict. MC-18, it was in the quiet, unchanging truth. A father and daughter living parallel lives, separated not by anger but by worlds that no longer touched. For Tom, the horizon continued expanding, outer space, global premieres, breathtaking stunts. For Suri, the horizon narrowed into something smaller, safer, shaped only by the people who stayed. The silence between them had not shattered, it had solidified. And as fate would show, the next chapter of Suri's life would reveal a truth even deeper than distance. A truth written not in confrontation, but in the choices she made as she stepped into adulthood. The truth of a person's life is not always spoken aloud. Sometimes it lives in their choices, in the subtle shifts of identity, in the quiet defiance of becoming someone new. Cut to B-roll. New York streets. For Suri, the girl once introduced to the world as the miracle child of Hollywood's brightest star, that truth emerged slowly, first as a whisper, then as a quiet declaration that carried more weight than any public statement ever could. In the comfortable anonymity of New York City, she grew into a young woman who moved with purpose, grace, and a reserve shaped by years of silent observation. MC-19. She discovered music, theater, and film not through the overwhelming machinery of Hollywood, but through classrooms filled with teenagers who created stories for passion, not for fame. While Tom's world revolved around box office numbers and global premieres, hers revolved around school performances, art projects, and the gentle rhythm of a life she could finally call her own. By the time she reached LaGuardia High School, a prestigious institution known for birthing artists, Suri had already carved a path independent from the name she was born into. She sang with a softness that carried surprising depth. She directed short films with classmates, her vision shaped not by celebrity legacy, but by an earnest hunger to create something that belonged only to her. Zoom in hallways and rehearsal rooms, she wasn't the daughter of Tom Cruise. She was simply another young artist chasing curiosity. But it was a decision she made in her senior year that revealed the truth she had carried for so long. MC-20. When the program booklet for her school's production of The Addams Family was released, audiences who scanned the names of the cast and crew stumbled upon something unexpected. She was no longer listed as Suri Cruise. For the first time, her name appeared as Suri Knoll. Knoll, her mother's middle name, a piece of identity untouched by shadows, expectations, or fame. It was a name chosen carefully, a name that carried freedom, a name that quietly severed her from a legacy she did not choose. This was not a teenager experimenting with reinvention. It was a message written in ink, not spoken in words. I am not defined by the world I was born into. I am my own. SFX, pen writing. When she graduated in June 2024, that same name appeared again on the official list. In a small auditorium filled with clapping families, she walked across the stage, radiant in a way that did not demand attention. Katie sat among the parents, wiping tears with quiet pride, the pride of a mother who fought the impossible to give her child a life untouched by the storms of fame. MC 21. Across an ocean, Tom was seen smiling at a Taylor Swift concert in London. The contrast struck the world like a soft blow, one moment marking a daughter's passage into adulthood, the other a snapshot of a man unburdened by that milestone. Two lives drifting further apart, two narratives unfolding in different realities. That summer, Suri embarked on a chapter entirely on her own. She enrolled at Carnegie Mellon University in Pittsburgh, majoring in fashion, an art form that allowed her to blend creativity with structure, vision with precision. Katie helped her move into her dorm, carrying boxes with her own arms, not passing them off to staff or assistants. There was no entourage, no flashing lights, just a mother helping her daughter begin a new life. As Suri stepped into college life, she moved with the confidence of someone who had grown accustomed to living far from the spotlight. Cut to B-roll, campus life. She took classes, wrote music in quiet corners, and walked campus pathways as just another student, blending into the flow of youth. Most people didn't recognize her. Those who did rarely approached her. She had mastered the art of being unremarkable in public, a skill born from years of needing to disappear. In 2025, during filming for Katie's new movie Happy Hours, Suri visited the set. 19 years old, dressed in khaki pants and a white tank top, she looked calm, self-contained, and entirely different from the child the world once knew. MC-22 crew members described her as polite and observant, but always with a touch of distance, an invisible gap that no one dared to reach across. Then in October of that year, a single moment captured by bystanders spread quietly through social media. Suri sat on a doorstep in New York, her head buried in her hands, the weight of something unseen pressing down on her. Within minutes, Katie arrived in an Uber, rushed to her daughter's side, and sat beside her. They spoke softly. Moments later, they walked away together toward a cafe, their shoulders touching, their steps in sync. SFX. City ambience to strangers, it was an ordinary moment between a mother and daughter. But to those who knew their story, it was a reminder of how fiercely they had clung to each other through storms no one else had lived through. Now 19, Suri's life is a tapestry of quiet determination. She writes songs that few have heard. She studies fashion with the seriousness of someone building a future independent of her past. MC-23, she uses her new name on documents, on school forms, on creative projects. Piece by piece, she has rewritten her identity. Her connection with her father remains an unanswered question. No public reunions, no confirmed visits, no photographs. Just silence, unchanged, unwavering, unbroken. Yet her choices speak louder than silence ever could. They reveal a truth she carries gently but firmly. She is no longer the child shaped by the world she never chose. She is the woman choosing the world she wants. In the end, their story rests not in the noise of fame, nor in the storm of headlines that once followed their every step, but in the quiet space between two lives that no longer touch. Zoom in. Tom Cruise continues rising higher and farther than any actor before him, preparing to film scenes beyond Earth's atmosphere, chasing the limits of human possibility with the same fire that once defined his youth. The world cheers him on, captivated by his fearlessness, unaware of the soft place in his life where time has carved an absence he cannot outrun. Suri, now walking her own path with a name she chose and a future she is building, gently carries none of the spectacle that once surrounded her. MC-24, her steps are steady, her world small but peaceful, shaped by the mother who shielded her from storms that would have swallowed her whole. She is not the miracle child of a Hollywood legend. She is a young woman discovering who she is, free from the gravity of a past she never asked for. Between them lies a distance wider than fame, deeper than belief, older than memory, a distance made not of anger but of silence. And silence, once stretched across years, becomes a landscape that neither may know how to cross again. SFX, wind, perhaps time will soften its edges. Perhaps one day two worlds will turn just enough to meet. Or perhaps some divides remain part of the story forever, unhealed, unspoken, and quietly tragic. If this journey moved you, hit that like button and share your reflections below. Every story, even one written in silence, deserves to be heard. This is Hollywood Stars Update, reminding you that the most powerful truths are often the quietest ones.